when this starts recording, you should see a banner now that says, there you go, recording. Okay, so if you don't see that, when we get into the class, say, hey, Dave, you forgot to record it. Oh, great. I don't want transcripts. There, go away. I don't know why it started doing transcripts all the time. Okay, so this is BU 351. I think the formal title here, let me do this. I'm going to start sharing my slides right up front. See if I can get everything set up here. Oops, no, I want to do it this way. Let me stop sharing for a minute. Because you don't need to see all this stuff over here on the side. So I need to put it in slide view or presentation slideshow. And I need to shrink that one. I will get this right here in a second, I promise. There we go. Okay. Now I have to move that over there. Nope. Did that wrong. Put this back over here. Now I'm going to share my slide. There. Now, are you seeing that in a basically a full slide view without all the little slides on the side now?
Yeah.
Okay. This crusty old fart figured out how to do the technology right. So BU 351, Consumer and Family Finance. Just to give you a quick overview of the class, we are going to, actually, I'm going to stop sharing that slide for a minute, and hopefully I can talk while I'm going here. We are going to, the first week or two, we are going to hit on macroeconomic type specifics. And from there, we'll move into more detailed stuff, kind of like I was telling you before we started the recording, where we're going to, one night we're going to have a realtor come in. I've got a gentleman that he hasn't committed, but I'm hoping I can get him to come in. He works at one of the banks up there, and I just drew a blank on the name of the bank. Anyway, he works at one of the banks up there, and he's going to come in and talk to us about investing and the kinds of things we do with investment. So hopefully I can make that happen. If not, you guys will have to get the knowledge that I have about investing. Oops, hit the wrong button there. Syllabus. Okay, now let me see if I can come back to seeing you, and I'll hit the share. And I know I did a slide, a video last week with the syllabus, so I'm not going to go as detailed this evening as I did in that video. Did you get a chance to watch that video?
Yeah, I watched it. Okay.
Hopefully everybody else did too. So I'm just going to hit on this fairly quickly in case you have any questions. You guys know the basic format of the class. I think almost everybody has had at least one class with me before. So you guys kind of know, my style. Sometimes I will run down rabbit trails, and when I do, I'll stop and shoot the rabbit, and we'll get back to where we were supposed to be and keep going. But we've got the general objectives here. We're going to learn the difference. What's the difference between consumer finance and personal finance, and some of the history of the culture. One of the things that we'll do some this evening and some next week is talk about current events and how current events affect what we're doing. And then there's some, the specific things that we want to get into as far as the learning objectives for the class. I want to make sure you guys understand what I was saying in the video for last week. There are 3 books to this class, and there are 3 papers to write. Basically, you've got 5 grades in the class. You've got 3 papers to write, and you've got 2 classroom presentations to do. Okay? That's going to be tricky with the fact that, one, we missed last week. Hopefully you guys have got the book and have started reading, and I've got one of the papers turned in already. I've got a chance to do a quick skim of it. I'll get into more detailed grading on it here in the next day or 2. But for those of you that haven't, you should already be working on your paper for that first book. I trust that you found it was a fairly easy read. I tried to pick books for this class that are fairly easy reads. The books, or excuse me, the papers. Those of you that have had me in class before have probably already done a class where you've done reflective learning papers. It's the kind of papers that I prefer to have you guys write. And part of that is because you guys do so much of the academic, third person, I just don't like writing in that style. Let me put it that way. So I have found a method by which I can allow you guys to write papers that I think that you get more from by writing this type of a paper. Others would argue with me and say, no, the academic paper is more what you need to do. But if you can demonstrate to me that you've read the books and you tell me what you learned from reading the books without giving me a book report like you did in high school, you're giving me a report, or you're giving me a paper that tells me what you learned and you're telling me in your own words, I think that that lets me know that you guys did get from the books what the intent was for you to get. And then this is the first time I've tried this thing where we use, rather than you having to go out and do some additional research or do a research paper or that kind of stuff, you basically take the material that you got from reading the book. So you've read the book and you've written a paper, and then you got to do a presentation on what you got from reading the book. Basically, it's going to be a distilled version of what you put in your paper. Because if you give me a 5 to 6 page paper, you're not going to be able to do a presentation on that in 5 minutes. Okay, so it's going to be a distilled version of what you put in your paper. Since this is going to be very difficult to do as far as live classroom presentations, what I believe I'm going to have you guys do is you're going to record, and the easiest way to do this is going to be right in Teams. You go to Teams, you go up and you start a meeting all by yourself, and you use the 3 little dots at the top of the page, and you click on those 3 little dots and you hit record, just like I'm doing this evening, recording this, our session this evening. But you hit those 3 little dots and you record your presentation, and then you hit the 3 little dots again and you stop that presentation. And then what I need you to do in Canvas is in Canvas, you need to send me a message in the assignment slot. You need to go into there and say, video has been recorded in Teams. And I will then be able to go into our Teams channel. Now you need to do that, and the reason I want you guys to do it this way is because it'll make it easier for me to access. You guys need to open up Teams. You need to open the channel for this class, and then you need to open that meeting so that it records. If you guys go look at the channel for this class, that video that I recorded last week is in the chat line for this class. Victoria, are you looking at it now to see if you can pull it up? Okay. You should be able to go to Teams, open this class, and in the general part at the bottom, you should see where this class recorded. Okay, so that's what I need you guys to do. I need you to all record it in Teams while you're in this channel, and it will save right to this channel. Okay. If for some reason it doesn't save to this channel, you just need to be able to send me a link to it. Okay. Or the reality is, if you have a YouTube channel that you use all the time and you're used to doing stuff there and you want to record it in YouTube, I'm fine with that, but you got to send me a link to your YouTube channel or to that specific video in your YouTube channel, because what I want to be able to do so that everybody in the class gets the benefit of this, because I read your paper, so I know what you got from reading the book. So the intent's kind of going to be that what I want to do is I want to be able to show your videos in the class, so that we're sharing, with each student, we're sharing back and forth the different things that we picked up from reading the book. Okay. That said, these things do not have to be long, 5 to 8 minutes. Okay. And if you can do some PowerPoint slides to go along with it, it kind of works as a visual aid to assist you as you're doing the class or you're doing the presentation. So that's what you got for those first 2 books, Whatever Happened to Penny Candy, and Your Money Counts. And then the 3rd book is Money Matters for Teens. And like I told you in the video last week, don't let that teens part in there get you bent out of shape. Okay, because Money Matters for Teens it's just a matter of bringing it down to a perspective of somebody that's 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. And since most of you are in that 18, 19, 20-year-old category, I think it fits pretty well. Okay. And then classroom participation. Those of you that are signed up to take the class in class, though a couple of you are not here this evening, as we move forward, I need you to be in the class. Just simply because that's the way the system's supposed to work. If you're signed up to be in class, you need to be here. You're not physically having to sit in a classroom. We're using Teams as our classroom, but you still need to be present and taking the class. For those of you that are online, if you are available on Wednesday evenings and can be here, I highly encourage you to be here, because it just makes things go easier in the class when we can have back and forth communications. I get feedback from you guys as we're moving along. Okay. Then on page 4 of this thing, it's got the list of the books specifically, those mandatory things that are on all the syllabi, and then the rubric. Victoria, did you have any problems understanding the rubric and what I'm looking for on the papers?
I don't think so. I didn't look at it that closely.
Okay. I mean, it's pretty simple. The reality is 50% of the grade is the content. 20% of the grade is the structure. So 70% of this thing is, how did you put your paper together? Did it flow from start to finish? And did you give it to me in the manner in which I'm asking, making it a first person reflective paper? Okay, without it being in chapter 1 I learned this, and in chapter 2 I learned this, and no, because that's the kind of stuff you did in high school, and you guys ain't in high school no more. Okay, yeah, there's stuff in there about formatting and grammar. I think all of you know that unless your grammar is like really way out there messed up, I may not catch it myself. I use Grammarly when I write papers to catch my grammar mistakes. So I highly advise that, by the way. With you being in school, I highly advise it. It's well worth the, I think it's like $9 a month, and you're constantly having to write papers. It's well worth it. Okay. And then the last part of this syllabus is when I was first building the class, I thought, because we were going to have a number of students that were doing online class, I thought we were going to use the discussion questions a bunch. So that's what, what is a substantive post? And that's basically, Dr. Hessel wrote this up, and I haven't been able to write it any better, so I just use his. This was from when I was in a class he was teaching and I was a student, and I was like, I asked him, I said, hey, can I like borrow that? And he's like, sure, go ahead. So, this is, if we do have a discussion question or two that we do through this cycle, this is kind of what I'm looking for in a discussion question post, okay? So just be aware of that. And then obviously that's the 3 books and the other stuff that I used in order to put this class together. So let me stop sharing that, close that one out, and let's go back to sharing this. Okay, are slides back up now, Victoria? Okay, so I'm actually back to where I need to be, and things are moving along fairly well. Okay, so consumer and family finance. Victoria, unfortunately, since you're the only one here, you're going to get picked on a little bit tonight. But if you had to guess and give me an answer as to what do you think is the difference between consumer and family finance, what would you respond to that as?
Well, consumer is obviously, it's defined focusing on like people who are buying things and how all that works, since pretty much everyone is some type of consumer. And then family finance is like specifically how you're going to apply everything that's happening in the consumer world to your family, I guess.
That's pretty good. The way, and I don't have it in a slide as far as a specific, but the way I would describe it, if somebody just asked me that question, what's the difference between consumer and family finance? Well, just like you said, consumer finance is just that. It's all the stuff that gets bought and sold, and that process for us as managers to bring a product to market and to sell it, and consumers are out there buying it. Whereas when I think of family finance, it just like you said, it's kind of all of those things that are involved in that consumer, because we as families are consumers. But when I think of family finance, I think we have to get much more detailed in our thought processes, in that, we have to know what are our revenues? How much money do we have coming in? What's our budget? How much money are we putting out for gas and electric and utilities and car payment and mortgage payment or rent and all of those different things we have to put out. So when you start talking family finance, you start talking about revenue or pays coming in, and then your budget and what's going out, and things like and I know this is something that you guys are going to look at me and you're going to think I got rocks in my head, okay? But even at your age, starting now to plan for retirement, so that you don't get to be my age and not have the ability to retire. Okay, I've been very fortunate. I spent 20 years in the Army, so I have a military retirement where as long as I'm breathing, or let me rephrase that, because I could not be breathing, a machine could be doing it for me, but as long as they haven't said time of death is 6:45, okay? As long as some doctor hasn't declared me dead, I get a paycheck every month. Okay. Now, is that paycheck enough to live on? Probably not. Okay. But then I'm not ready to retire anyway. So that's the reason I moved down here to Texas. The good Lord opened opportunities for me back down here in Texas. That plus Miss Gwen was tired of the Missouri winters. This last winter, when it was minus 21 degrees, she looked at me and she said, I'm not doing another one of these. So we had to start looking for that was the good Lord telling me it was time to move back to Texas, and he was doing it through my wife. Okay. So but all of that all of this concept of family finance came into play when Miss Gwen and I were thinking about moving back to Texas. We had, do we have a job? Do we have money to buy a house? What's our budget going to be? Do both of us have to get a job? Does one of us have to get a job? Do we have enough money in savings to be able to put the deposit down or the down payment down on the house? so that we can bring our house payment down a little bit and get it into a more manageable range on a monthly payment. All of those things went into it, and that's that family finance piece to it. It's taking all of those things into consideration. Okay, so you tracking with me? All right, so let's see about moving forward here. See if I can make this move. There we go. So what does the Bible say about financial literacy? Okay, so we're going to hit on literacy a little bit right here up front, and that is literacy is just what it sounds like, you know, being literate or being learned and knowledgeable about a subject. Okay, in this case, we're talking finances. Okay, and probably the best scripture that I could pull out was from Luke 16:10 to 13, and it says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with very much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. If you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, how can you be trusted sorry, my dyslexia is getting to me tonight. How can you be trusted with true riches? Jesus was basically telling, you know, the disciples at this point, well, not just the disciples, but those that were gathered around, that this was, he after this specific text, he went into the parable of the talents, and talked about how the master, you know, gave 5 talents to one and 3 talents to another, or 2 talents to another and 1 talent to a third, and what was done with those talents while he was gone. So the one thing that I find quite interesting in doing my study and getting ready for this class is if you look at scripture, there's over 2,300 verses in the Bible that reference money in some way or another. It is the second most common theme in all of what Christ has to tell us. With all that he talks about, it is the second most common theme in what he talks about. So the facts are that we have God's part and then we got our part. And the reality is there's 2 separate economies there. Okay, we've got God's economy and we've got ours. God's economy with and the economies that people invent. Scripture reveals a good deal, and I'm going to read a lot of this to you. Sorry, I normally don't read my slides, but I think this is important, so I'm going to this evening. The fact is that the way most people handle their money is in sharp contrast to God's financial principles. And that is a broad, generic statement. I would like to think that most of us that are in and around Calvary have the biblical learning and knowledge that we somewhat manage our money better than the general public, as far as doing so in a godly scriptural manner. But that not necessarily 100%. Okay. In Isaiah 55:8, we read, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, and nor are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." So we understand that we're not necessarily always in tune and able to follow exactly what God's leading us through, because our thoughts are not His. We glorify the Lord and we strive to be like Him. But the fact is that we're never going to be there. Okay, probably the biggest difference between the 2 economies is that God's economy, we're living for the Lord, is the central role in the economy. And though it sounds very elementary, it's distinct and profound implications. The fact is that there's a quote that my mother used to tell me, and this was back before back, you guys, I don't, do you guys even know what a checkbook is? I know I use references sometimes that you guys are like, huh? But there are, back when I had a checkbook, a comment that my mother made to me one time has kind of stuck with me. And she says, if you show me your checkbook, I can tell you where your priorities are in life. And she was 100% right, because the reality is where we spend our money and where we spend our time, those are the two most valuable assets that we have, is time and money. And where we spend both of those will lay out for us exactly what our priorities are in life. Somebody from the outside looking in can look at those two things and tell what our priorities are. And if our time spent and money spent is spent in the world's economy without taking into consideration God's economy and how we do things that's focused on the Lord and Him being a central role in our thought process, that will be very obvious. Okay, so how we handle our money influences our relationship with the Lord. Jesus equates how we handle our money to the quality of our spiritual life. Going back to the passage we read before in Luke 16:11, he says, therefore, if you have not been faithful in the case of worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches? Who will entrust true riches to you? A different, not translation, but a different version of the Bible there. Just simply because I wanted to see, what did the ESV say versus the NASB. The first one was NASB. This is an ESV. Okay. We see this illustrated in the parable of the talents. Like I said, that's exactly where Jesus went next in Scripture. The master congratulates the servant who has managed his money faithfully. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And that's exactly that biblical economy, the scriptural economy that I was talking about earlier. If we're managing the things that God has given us and we're doing so well, He will say, enter into the joy of your master. Okay? So, and how many of you have heard that money is evil? I've heard it. Okay? I've even heard people say, the Bible says money's evil. Well, that's not quite true. Okay? The Bible tells us that the love of money is the root of evil. Okay? When we get to the point where our love of money, where we get to the point where we're loving the money, that's the root of evil, because that leads to conceit, that leads to greed, that leads to a lot of other sins. Okay? The passion for money is not in and of itself a bad thing. Paul's word to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:10 was not an indictment of money, but a warning that we can't worship money. Okay, and that's what it boils down to. Money is a tool. Okay, much like a shovel. If I need to move gravel, okay, a shovel and a wheelbarrow is a tool. Well, if I need to purchase things, even at Calvary University, they've got to pay for the electricity, and they got to pay for the water, and they got to pay for the food that Joe feeds you guys, and all of that different stuff. Money is just a tool. Okay, when we get to the point where we've moved money and the pursuit of it and everything to a point where it now has prominence over and above God, there's where we run into our problem. Okay, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, as it were. You guys know all of this, but I felt it important to bring this out right up front. Okay, money is the reward for hard work. Yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't think about much, okay? But both Jesus and Paul affirm this idea in Luke 10:7 and 1 Timothy 5:8. God is glorified when we apply our gifts and our talents to the marketplace and rewarded with money. In fact, the Bible teaches that an entitlement mindset that looks for money without work is a sinful lifestyle. Okay, so if we're just trying to get money but we're not working, that's a sinful lifestyle. But if we're willing to take the talents that God's given us and apply it in the marketplace, there's nothing wrong with being a Christian and having money. Okay, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's what we do with the money and our desire to acquire the money that a lot of times gives us problems. Okay, so possessions, when our possessions compete with the Lord for first place in our lives. This is kind of what I was talking about a while ago. The Lord tells us that we cannot serve two masters. Okay, either a man cannot serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will devote to one and despise the other. A pastor friend of mine was often fond of saying, "There's nothing wrong with having money." It's when money has, what he would tell me is, "Dave, there's nothing wrong with having money. It's when money has you that's the problem." Okay, and Paul warns us about this in Timothy 6:8-10. Money makes a poor idol. And when it's worshipped, it plunges our soul into spiritual and physical ruin. Okay? This doesn't just, have you seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street? I haven't watched the whole movie. I've watched bits and pieces of it, but I've never watched the whole thing through. But there's a couple of pieces of it that kind of caught my mind, okay? This doesn't just happen in The Wolf of Wall Street, but it can happen to anyone when money becomes their driving, all-encompassing, all-consuming passion, okay? We brought, and Paul again tells Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:7, we brought nothing into this world and we will take nothing out of this world. When money is a god, it fuels an attitude of greed, of envy, which dangers our human relationship and distracts us from our God-given mission. Okay, so I wanted to kind of put all of this right up front so that people understand. A lot of folks think that economics and accounting and finance and all of that's not found in the Bible. And I can assure you that I could spend 3 days, all day long for 3 days, showing you that is a very incorrect statement, right? All right. So what's this course all about? I'm going to hit this slide, and I'm going to hit this slide, and then we're going to take a break for a minute because I need to go get me a cup of coffee. I've been talking all day, and my throat's kind of raw. So we're going to hit this slide, and then we'll take a break for about 10 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll get into the slides for we've been into the slides for tonight's class, but the specific slides for the economic piece of tonight's class. Okay. So what's the course all about? It's a study of personal and family financial planning, goals, and objectives. Okay. So we're going to talk about economy and how the economy works, but we're going to be more focused on the family side of this. And we're going to look at financial planning, setting goals, budgeting, different objectives that we want to reach. The reality is, at some point, I'm assuming most of y'all want to get married, and you're going to want to buy a house. What's that? What's that? I saw that. Okay. And at some point, you're going to want to buy a house. You may not start out buying a house. You may start out renting, living in an apartment. Trust me, I did it for years. Okay. But when that time comes, even living in an apartment, we have to figure out, do we have the money to pay for the rent, to pay for, the utilities, all of those things that goes into, what it costs us to live. So we're going to do some budgeting and set some objectives. We'll gain an understanding of the difference between consumer and personal finance. We kind of hit on that at the very beginning, but we'll get into it a little bit more. We're going to do some work on recognizing consumer problems and the links, and link them to potential private and public solutions. Okay, that's kind of the getting into the current event stuff. Okay, and I promise I will do my best to keep politics out of it. However, I do not apologize for the fact that I am a fiscal conservative. So my finances, my politics as a whole tend to run conservative. But when it comes to finance, I'm a little more conservative even than most folks. Okay. We're going to apply lessons from history to consumer culture, and current consumer problems. And again, that'll get into that current event stuff. Well, what kind of stuff happened like this in the past? What's happening now? Where are we going to go with this? Okay, and then now here's a question, and I will put this to the class as a whole. That last book and that last paper that has to be written, you still got to read the book, okay, because you need some information that's out of that book. But I am amenable to changing the last paper. Instead of doing a paper based on that book specifically, if you want to do a personal financial plan for your last paper, or instead of your last paper, well, here's what I will say. I need you guys to answer me over the next 2 weeks, and let me know before we go into the Thanksgiving break whether you want to do the paper on the book or whether you want to do a financial plan. And we will discuss it and see where we're going to go from there. Whether I haven't decided yet, and again, this is the first time this class has been taught, so I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to have everybody do a paper or everybody do a financial plan, or whether I'm going to leave it up to you and let you choose which one you do. And I'll be thinking about that more over the next couple of weeks myself. But what I want is information, input from you guys. Because if I think there's 9 of you in the class, and if I have, if 7 of the 9 come back and say you'd rather do a financial plan, well, then we'll do a financial plan. Okay. But we'll kind of do a group discussion and decision making, and that group discussion and decision making may be all through my email, because all of you won't necessarily, or I may post that. You know what? In fact, I will post that as a discussion question after class this evening, and let you guys kind of interact between yourselves, and we'll make a decision then before we go to Thanksgiving, on the Thanksgiving break, as to what you guys have to do for that last paper. Okay? Victoria, did you have something you wanted to say? You look like you did.
I already wrote the last paper.
Oh, you did? Wow. What'd you do? Write all 3 papers already?
Well, I didn't want to do my other homework. And I accidentally misread the Your Money Matters and the Money Matters for Teens order. So I already read the Money Matters for Teens because I messed up the order, and then I just already read the paper.
So you still got you've done 2 books, but you did number 2 and number 3 in the wrong order. Okay, that's fair enough. So I will tell you, since you've already got the paper written, if you want to go ahead and turn that paper in, that's fine. And the rest of us will figure out whether we want to do a paper or whether we want to do a financial plan. I'm amenable to either one, but I just kind of want to know where you guys want to go with this. Okay. We will get into family financial plans on the class before. Well, what's today? Today is the 3rd, okay, the 7th, probably the 17th, no, 17th, 24th. Yeah, because the 24th is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And I told you guys in the video last week, I'm not gonna, I think that's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, isn't it? Look at a calendar real quick for me, Victoria. So the 24th is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving? Okay. So we're not gonna have class that night, because I know a lot of you will be traveling, and nobody's gonna wanna be trying to, listen to a video that I did that week. So on the 17th, we will get into, financial planners and how we establish and set up financial plans for a family. Now, that's going to be kind of jumping it forward a little bit, because I want to be able to give you guys, and we probably won't get deep into financial plans, but I'll give you at least an overview of what a financial plan looks like. So that then over that weekend, let's say we have to have a decision made on this by the time we get back into class the following Wednesday after Thanksgiving, because we only have a couple of more classes then after that. Okay, so hopefully we may even come up with a decision before that, but I need you guys to at least be thinking on that and see what you want to do and let me know, and we'll move forward on that. But anyway, let's take a break. Victoria, how long of a break would you like, since it's just you and me? You good with about 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes is good.
Okay, so I've got like 2 minutes till 7, so let's come back at 7:10 and we will continue on. When at 7:10, turn your camera back on so I know you're there and ready, and I'll do the same with mine, and then we'll get started back at it, okay? This is not going to go until 9 o'clock tonight, because I'll tell you straight up, the weather down here is nasty as far as rainy. And with my back the way it is, I'm hurting a little bit already. So I'm not going to go until 9 o'clock tonight. So what you don't get from me tonight, you'll just get from me next week. Okay. But you guys, those of you that are online watching, you guys can fast forward through this next 10-minute section, or you can take a 10-minute break yourself if you want and come back. But Victoria, I'll see you at 7:10. Hey, hey. So I opened the door to my office and walked out, and I smelled orange scones with an orange blackberry marmalade to spread on them.
That sounds delicious.
It is. So you have to excuse me if I'm eating while, while we're going, because she made some good scones. You got blueberry muffin, don't you?
I made banana chocolate chip.
Mm. Okay, so are you still seeing the slides? Okay, so the first thing that we're going to hit on, and this is, I don't know, are you a news junkie? Do you like watching the news? And see, it's a generational thing. I got it from my grandpa. I'm a news junkie. I like watching the news. But one of the big things, and I'll tell you what, even if you haven't watched the news and you haven't heard them talking about it on the news and stuff, I guarantee you know what's happening, and that's inflation. Okay, have you been to the grocery store lately? Is there anything that you can buy at the grocery store that hasn't gone up in price? No. How about the gas station? Have you been to the gas station lately? Trust me, I understand that feeling. Okay. So you know that right now we're in a period of inflation. Okay. Now, economists, and that's those guys who have more time to sit around and think about how people spend their money than I guess they're a necessary evil. But I'm the kind who would rather be out doing something and earning money than sitting around thinking about how other people spend their money to make money. But to each his own, I guess. But economists will tell us that to have about 1.5% inflation on an annual basis is actually good for an economy. It shows the economy is growing. But when we start getting north of 2 to towards 3 and 4, and right now we're at about 5.5% inflation, that's not sustainable. Okay. Now, if I were asking you, don't read my slides. If I was asking you, what is inflation? Tell me how you would describe inflation.
Like blowing up a balloon. There's a good size of balloon, and then there's a dangerous size of a balloon.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Say that again.
Like blowing up a balloon, like there's a nice good sized balloon, but then if you keep blowing it up, eventually it'll pop.
Okay, and it will. Okay, but if you keep blowing it up, is that a good thing? Because we're getting more and more and more of it.
It's fun to play with.
And it is fun to play with. Okay, but the reality is inflation. And normally when people hear the word inflation, their thoughts immediately go to the cost of goods. Okay, and the fact that everything costs more. And they think that is inflation. Well, it is, but the reality is it's more a symptom of inflation. Okay, it's kind of like when you get a cold. Okay, is the fact that you're sneezing and your nose is running, is that the cold? No, that's the symptom and how your body is showing that it's trying to fight the virus. Okay. The cold itself is a virus or an infection that you've got inside your system. Okay. Well, prices going up in reality is not inflation in and of itself. Prices going up is a symptom of inflation. Okay. Inflation, to put it in layman terms, okay, or terms that make sense to me anyway. Inflation, the best way I've learned to describe inflation is too much money, and this is somebody else said it, but it made sense to me. Okay, too much money chasing too many products causes price to go up. Okay? When there's more money in the system than there are products to be had, what happens is the value of our dollar actually goes down because it takes more of those dollars in order to get what it is we want. I.e., the cost of things have gone up. Well, the reason the cost of things has gone up is because there's more money out there for people to use towards buying them. All right. And a little bit of a civics and economics lesson combined. As we're coming out of COVID, the government put a lot of money into keeping the economy moving because we shut everything down. Okay. But the government needed the economy to keep moving so that when we open things back up, people would have money. There would be people there to provide the goods and services. All of that stuff would be happening. Was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? Well, I don't know that that's necessarily my place to say, because everybody has to evaluate those types of things for themselves. Were you going to say something? Okay. The reality for me is, yes, it was a good thing we had to keep the economy going. Those people that, due to no fault of their own, they didn't have a job, they still had to have money to pay for the food that they were eating and all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I suppose it was a good thing that the government stepped in. But at some point, and this is my problem with government, and it doesn't matter really whether it's Democrats or Republicans or independents or who's in there running it. Once the government turns the spigot on, sometimes they forget how to turn it off. And that's kind of where we are right now. If you listen to the government and they're talking about, well, back in March, they did the $1.9 trillion. And do you have any clue how much $1 trillion is? $1 trillion is 1,000 million. Excuse me, $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. 1 billion is 1,000 million. That's a lot of money, okay? So the government back in April pumped almost $2 trillion into the economy. And now they've got a couple of bills up in Congress they've been debating and trying to get pushed through. And one of them is a 1.7 or $1.5 trillion bill for infrastructure. And then another one is a $1.75 trillion, and they're calling it human infrastructure, where they're wanting to spend money on all kinds of, I call it pet projects. Everything from free college at a junior college level, the first 2 years of college at junior college is being free, to daycare and early schooling for kids starting as young as 3 years old, to senior care, to, again, this goes back to my very conservative with money concept, okay? But the government is trying to turn us into a socialist nation, or some in the government anyway, are trying to turn us into a socialist nation, and not socialist by politics, but more socialist by economics, where, the good for the masses. Well, the problem that we have is that there is no free lunch. You should have picked that up in reading that first book, right? There is no free lunch out there, okay? Obviously, the guy that wrote that book comes from a more conservative bent as well. But in order to pay for that, somebody's got to give it up, okay? In order for the government to spend it, somebody's got to give it up. Or the government then has to put more money into circulation, i.e. inflation. There's more money out there chasing the same amount of goods, which causes the price of those goods to go up, okay? Now, some inflation, like I said, is good, because if we get a little bit of money in influx to where the money can be in people's pockets and they can use it before the cost of the goods goes up, that's a good thing, or some would say, okay? Others would say it's never a good thing, okay? So there's three types of inflation. Okay. Well, before we get there, somehow I went too far forward on my slides. Okay, I wasn't quite ready for doing inflation yet. We're still talking about the value of our money. Somehow I went a couple of slides forward. So we're going to back up just a little bit. And understanding the value of the American dollar. It all ties in together. Okay. Man, my mouse is being quite sensitive tonight. So those things we were talking about earlier, like a gallon of milk that used to cost $2.08 now costs $3, or a gallon of gasoline that a year ago was $1.75 and now is almost $3. Those types of things. Okay, well, if you look at these stamps, these are all stamps that the U.S. has produced over the course of years, and I picked these stamps because I can remember all of these. Okay, they've got 1 and 2 cent stamps that people used to be able to mail stuff with too. But the first stamp that I remember going to the post office and buying was 10-cent stamps, and I could mail a letter with a 10-cent stamp. Okay, and then it went from 10 cents to 12 cents to 15 cents to 18 cents to 21 cents to 24 cents. I remember buying this one of the Wright brothers. I put this one on there because this is a photo of a collectible one, because the plane got printed upside down. But then it went to 29 cents and 32 cents and 41 cents, and then somebody actually got smart and decided they were going to print forever stamps, so you could buy them at the price they were now, and they're good forever, even if you don't use them. Even if the price goes up before you use them, they're good. So somebody got smart there, but I can't remember the last time I actually put a stamp on something. I think I was up at Calvary and was trying to mail a couple of things out for Calvary and put some stamps on it. But I think the last time I bought stamps, they were like 53 cents. Do you know how much it costs now to mail something?
Like 57 cents or something. I don't know.
Is it 57 cents now? It just keeps going up, So, but that's an example. Now, this has happened over time, but that's an example of the onward march of the cost to do different things. Okay. But the reality is, over the course of 50 years, it went from 10 cents to the 57 cents that it is now. Okay. So it's the same process. It's to lick a piece of paper and stick it on an envelope and drop that envelope in the mail and have that mail get to wherever it's going. Okay. Now, if it's going from Kansas City to New York City, the distance between Kansas City and New York City hasn't moved. But the cost to get something from one place to the other has increased over the last 50 years. Just kind of an example of the decreasing value of our money. Here's one that's a little more pertinent today. Okay. This looks at stuff from 2000 on the left-hand side. And it says today. The reality is that's not true. I pulled this slide from a presentation that I saw back in 2018. So this is about 3.5 years old. Okay. So these numbers are probably a little bit off from there. Okay. So, it doesn't look too bad when you're looking at, well, something that cost me $1 in 2020 now costs me $1.59. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? What do you think? Something cost me $1 back in 2020 now costs me. When were you born?
98.
Oh, you actually have a 19 in front of your name, or in front of your birthday. Wow, you're one of the rare ones at college now. You're an old timer.
Yeah, I'm kind of old now. Yeah.
Yeah, wait till you get as old as me. You'll feel it too. Anyway, So you were 2 years old when this comparison started. So stuff that cost $1 when you were 2 years old now costs $1.59. Now that doesn't sound too bad, does it? But let's think about it when we start talking in multiples of this, okay? So now something that used to cost $10 now costs $15.89. Seems a little more expensive, right? The percentage is exactly the same, but now let's look at a house that in 2000 cost $100,000. That same house now costs $158,000. Okay? We're talking real money there. Okay? And that money makes a difference when it comes to, well, how much house can I buy? Okay, when you're trying to figure out as a young couple and you're wanting to move out of an apartment and buy a house, and well, just how much house can I buy? Okay, well, if you got the 158,000, the house you're buying today is not. $158,000 would have got you more house back in 2000. Okay. So yeah, and yeah, I'm not talking $1 million because I'm not up in that kind of stratosphere with money. Okay, but that $100,000 mark right there, that kind of jumped out at me when I was looking at this chart and remembering I had to go back and pull this from a class that I took back in 2018 with Dr. Hessel, and he showed this chart, and I was like, I remembered that chart, and I went and pulled it out of the class or out of the files. But this one just it jumped out at me then, and it still jumped. That same, this is 3 years old, so that $100,000 in 2000 is probably 161,000 or something now, because it's probably gone up even more. Okay, but that's kind of an eye opener, So that's the insidious part of inflation, okay, in that it makes the money that we have less valuable. Okay, well, as long as we're doing things where we keep up with, where we're making more money so that we can keep up with that, we're good. Okay, the problem is not everybody can keep up with making more money in order to keep up with the increased cost in goods. And there's where we start to run into the problem, especially if you happen to be, let's say I had moved down here and I decided I was just simply going to live on my retirement checks. Well, that's fixed income. That money doesn't go up. I mean, every once in a while, the government will increase it, what they call a cost of living allowance. But that money, they haven't given us a cost of living allowance on our retirement in the last 5 years. Well, things cost more now than they did 5 years ago. So the money that I was getting from my retirement 5 years ago doesn't go as far now as it used to. Now, I'm working because I want to work. Okay, can you imagine me sitting on the front porch drinking iced tea, being retired? It's just not a picture in your mind, is it? Okay. Now, guess what? It ain't in mine either. Okay. So, but for those people that are fully retired and they have a fixed income, this stuff starts to get real fast. If you've got it budgeted that you're paying $2.08 for a gallon of milk and you're paying $1.80 for gasoline, and all of a sudden your milk goes to $3 a gallon and so does your gasoline, that sometimes you have to decide, well, I'm going to get the gasoline and I'm just not going to get the milk because I can't afford it. Okay. So that's the insidious part of inflation. So getting back to where we were here, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video, and Victoria, I just need you to give me a thumbs up. I want to make sure that I figured out how to do this correctly so that you can hear the video without trying to hear it from my speakers through my microphone. I think I figured this out. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides and then I'm going to share the video. Okay, I got it paused for a second while I get this set up. I went ahead and I didn't share it while the ad was playing. I didn't figure you needed to see YouTube's ad. Okay, so I'm gonna share it.
Were amazingly different
Okay.
from what they are today.
Are you hearing that at all?
Mr. Darcy is supposed to have been one of the richest people in Britain. It's 1813,
Can you
and
hear
his
it?
income is £10,000 a year. Today, that's less than half of what a primary school teacher straight out of college would earn. In Sense and Sensibility, there's an argument about whether an income of £20 a week is enough to make you well off, and the answer is yes. It's there in living memory too. A cinema ticket was 30p in 1970. Today, it's £13. So why does inflation happen? And should we worry if it does? Governments track inflation obsessively and try to keep it low. There's a vast amount of data collected all the time to ensure that governments can say with amazing precision how the inflation rate is going. Is it on track for 2.3% per annum, or might the increase of 0.38% in February be a cause for alarm? This is, in big historical terms, a relatively new concern. In the 17th century, the Spanish Empire essentially collapsed from inflation without even realizing it was occurring. So, over time, societies have become obsessed with measuring inflation and very focused on managing it. So, why is there inflation? What makes it happen? There are basically three reasons. The first is what economists call cost-push inflation. This is where the costs to businesses rise and are then passed on to customers. There can be a lot of reasons for these rises. Firstly, raw materials, especially oil, might get more expensive for a very nice reason, because a lot of countries are developing and doing well. Secondly, workers might be asking for more money and succeeding either because they've organized themselves well politically or because schools and colleges haven't been training enough workers in the skills that companies need. Thirdly, land rents might be increasing because not enough factories and offices have been built, which tends to come down to political failures around building permits. The result of all this is that businesses then push their extra costs onto the consumer by raising prices. They don't want to, it's a scary move, but they have no choice. They'd go out of business otherwise. The second kind of inflation is called demand inflation. This is when there are increases in the number of people who want something whose supply can't keep up. The most common cause of demand inflation is an otherwise rather nice thing, that people are getting richer and have more money to spend. That's why government can cause inflation by lowering taxes. Everyone loves tax breaks because they raise disposable income, but in the longer term, raising demand can also cause price rises, thereby negating some of the initial boost of the tax break. Similarly, a fall in interest rates may cause short-term pleasure and long-term inflationary pressure. If interest rates on loans or mortgages fall, we might be tempted to take out a loan to buy the new car we've always wanted. But the car company, sensing solid demand, will soon enough jack up the price. If banks and governments inject more cash and credit into the economy, people have more money to spend. But if they're all chasing the same number of goods as before, it just means they can all offer more for the same. This is what happened around housing in the UK, particularly in London. There are broadly the same number of houses there were 25 years ago, but they all cost an absurd amount more. The third classic cause of inflation is governments printing money. There's a deep logic behind this idea, which can at first sound almost criminal. Governments often want to stimulate the economy to create more jobs, so they print more money. This can be done literally by increasing the number of notes in circulation, or they can do it by increasing government debt or by letting banks make bigger loans on the same security. In all these cases, the amount of money in circulation increases. But there's a big problem, because after a while it means the worth of every note starts to fall, because more notes are chasing the same number of things to buy. There's more money about, but it doesn't buy you more, it just pushes up prices. However, there is a possibility here, spotted by the economist and philosopher John Maynard Keynes. It takes time for the value of money to fall, so for a little while there can be more cash around and prices haven't yet risen. This is a window of opportunity that economies can, with a lot of luck, seize. At such Goldilocks moments, people can actually increase their consumption. Firms can afford to hire more workers and buy new machinery. And once they've done that, production will increase. There will be more stuff to buy before inflation has eaten up the gain. So there's a real expansion. A bit of inflation can grow the economy. That's a big but contested idea. The argument is that it doesn't matter if prices are going up 10% every year, if wages are going up 15%. So deliberate government-led inflation can be a mechanism for growing the economy. But it's a very risky move which has often backfired and been attacked by the great enemies of the Keynesian economists, people we now know as the monetarists, who believe that anything which increases inflation is always going to be an issue and must be avoided at all costs, whatever the short term. So why is inflation such a problem? The real problem is that not everything inflates at exactly the same rate. If everything went up by 100% a year and so did everyone's income and it was all totally steady and predictable, it would be weird, but it wouldn't actually do any harm. The harm comes from the fact that not everything changes at the same rate. In 1941 in Hungary, inflation reached 150,000% each day. A jelly bean that cost 10p on Monday morning would therefore cost the equivalent of £150 on Tuesday morning and £225,000 on Wednesday morning. That's incredibly complicated, but it's a problem only because other things would not be increasing as fast. If you kept your life savings under the mattress, you'd be wiped out in a day or two. The money that could have bought you a house on Monday would get you a jelly bean on Wednesday. This is the ultra extreme case, but it illustrates a basic point. Inflation is bad for savings. There's no point in putting money aside, and that's a pity, because saving money, the attitude of saving up for things before you buy them, is an admirable characteristic. Keeping inflation low rewards prudence. It helps long-term planning, because you can know what your money will be worth in the future, and this rewards taking care around costs. Ultimately, what inflation reflects is the instability of the world and of life itself. Prices rise because we can't yet keep the complex system known as the economy under control. There's always something going wrong or growing or falling or failing somewhere. Ideally, we'd keep inflation under control with a more or less fixed amount of money chasing a more or less stable amount of goods. But in reality, low inflation is extremely difficult to achieve because so many factors can derail it. Cost of materials, cost of labor, productivity, taxes falling or rising, exchange rates, again, falling or rising, a growing domestic economy, a neighboring economy that's growing, falling interest rates, the buying of government bonds, or the printing of money. In the end, we may have to accept that inflation is a bit like the weather or our own moods, something that's inherently rather unstable, something whose ups and downs we must endure even as we try to mitigate the extremes. Learning to live with inflation belongs to wisdom.
Okay, did I get the audio set back for me? Okay, so did that make any sense? I thought that was a fairly decent illustration on the concept of inflation. So we're going to hit some of those concepts that they talked about. So cost push inflation, okay? Basically, what we're talking about with cost push inflation is the producers of the world, their costs are going up, whether it's their raw materials or it's the cost of their labor, the workers that are producing whatever they're producing, there's a lot of things that go into play in other costs that affect them. Government regulations, and which is a big thing in the energy industry. You know, government regulations, the more the regulations are there, the more it costs them to get to the point where they can produce the oil or the whatever energy they're producing. So their costs go up. Well, if the government comes in and all of a sudden slaps a whole bunch of new regulations down on top of an industry, all of a sudden their costs go up. Well, the bottom line is, and we've discussed this in other classes, the reason we are in business is to... Why are we in business, Victoria?
I don't know. I haven't been in a business class in a while.
Business exists to make money. Okay? Business exists to make money. So it's called the bottom line for a reason. Okay? So if a business's costs are going up, whether it's the raw material or it's the labor to produce whatever it is that they're producing, or government regulation, whatever is causing their costs to go up, the business can only absorb that cost so much before they have to pass it on to the consumer. Okay, and that's called cost push inflation. Once their expenses get to a point where they have to pass it on to the customer, they're pushing that inflation or that extra cost onto the customer, and that's causing the prices to go up. Okay, the next piece to it, so you can read this slide. This talks about monopolies. A lot of times, if you have a situation where there's a monopoly in place, and OPEC, do you know what OPEC is? No. OPEC is like Saudi Arabia and all the oil producing countries over in the Middle East. Because they have a stranglehold on the oil in the world, they monopolize, or they can fix the price. Okay, why the cost of gasoline is going up, because they have decided they're not going to produce as much, and the government here has decided they're going to put regulations in place so that we can't produce as much. So now we have less raw material in place, which makes the raw material that is out there more valuable. It costs more for that raw material, that oil. So in order for Exxon and all of the different oil companies to get the oil to then refine it so that they can produce the gasoline that we're putting in our cars, their costs have gone up. Okay, so monopolies can twist and do things with expenses somewhat as well. Okay, that's just one piece of that cost. But basically, a monopoly, what they're doing is they're controlling the raw materials. At least in the case of OPEC, they're controlling the raw material availability, which causes the cost of that raw material to go up. Okay, so as we look at cost push inflation, we also have wage inflation occurs when workers have enough leverage to force their wages to increase. The most common place where you see that is with unions. Now, that's not the only place that it happens, but the most common place you see that is with unions. And that's where unions have enough leverage. A good example is the United Auto Workers. Whether they work for Ford or they work for Chevy or they work for whoever, in the United States, if they're an auto worker, you're going to most likely be part of a union. And what the union says is, we're going to work for this much money. Okay, well, when that contract expires, they renegotiate a new contract that they're, okay, now we're going to work for this much money. Well, if the car manufacturer doesn't want to pay that much, and he's like, no, can't pay you that much. Well, if the union has enough leverage, they go on strike, and depending on how long they're on strike, cars aren't being made. Then what happens is they come to an agreement, and it just depends on how much leverage the auto workers have as to how far up they can force the cost of their labor. The reality is, I believe, over the course of the last 100 years, that auto workers have been rather greedy in that, the average person doing an hourly wage right now is making about between $19 and $22 an hour. Now, Minimum wage is set by different states at different levels, but there's a minimum wage out there. But the average hourly worker right now, what the research I was doing here over the last couple of weeks, across the United States, the average hourly wage is between $19 and $22 an hour. The lowest paid United Auto Workers union member up in Detroit or up in the north side of Kansas City, working up at Claycomo Ford plant, the lowest paid auto worker, now some of them are getting paid a whole lot more, but the lowest paid auto worker is making $62 an hour. Yeah, that's what I said when I read that too. That's 3 times the national average. Well, that's why our cars cost so much too, because the automakers have been forced to push the cost of the expense and charge what they charge for a car onto us, because in order to stay in business and make money, they have to push the cost of that labor onto us. Okay, so demand pull inflation. Now, this one is one that we were kind of talking earlier, where I said too much money chasing too few goods. Excuse me. And what happens is when people have more money, like right now, people have got across the country, most folks have got more money than they did before because the government's been giving them money so that they can keep the economy going. Well, now they've got more money than they had before, and they're all trying to buy the same, everybody's trying to buy the same thing. Well, the people that are selling it, they realize that there's more people out there demanding it, and I can't get enough of them in, so I'm going to charge more for the ones that I am selling, so that I've got more money to then be able to reach back and pay more to my supplier in order to pull more forward. So that's that demand pull that we're talking about, when there's more money out there, so that you got the same number of goods, but and the same number of people, but the people got more money. So basically they get into a little bit of not necessarily a bidding war, but they've got more money to pay for it. The producers realize they've got more money to pay for it, so they raise the price to get as much as they can, until they raise it too high, and we got to bring it back down a little bit, okay? But that's you get the concept for the demand pull, where there's more people out there demanding it. That's what's happening in a lot of cases in our grocery stores. You know, in the grocery stores, actually, it's kind of a combination of both. The cost is going up because their suppliers are charging them more to get the goods to them. But the grocery stores also know that the people have more money, so they can charge more for it. So it's kind of a vicious circle there. And then currency flow, and that's the one in the video where they talked about the government producing more money. There's been a couple of interesting phenomenons in U.S. history where we had inflation that wasn't due to government producing more money. The first one was back in the mid 1800s, they called it the 49ers in 1849, when they discovered some gold out, or not some, they discovered a lot of gold out in California, and they had a gold rush. Well, gold, you know, a certain amount of gold would buy you a certain amount of stuff. Well, when the gold rush happened, we had a whole lot more gold out there. So the people that had the stuff to sell realized, well, hey, I was selling it for 2 bits. You know, now I can sell it for 5 bits because there's the people that have gold have more of it. So I want more of it too. So there was some inflation that happened there because there was more gold in the market. The other one that happened was in the early 1900s, in the Industrial Revolution, when we found oil and stuff here in the United States, and the supply of oil for production There was so much oil available that we had some inflationary issues there because there was the raw goods were so cheap that more people had it to sell. So there was the money they were getting for it, even though it was cheaper per barrel, they had so much more of it that they had more money in their hands and more money to spend. Other than that, every example in the United States that I was able to come across with currency flow inflation was because the government manipulated the amount of money in the economy, either by physically printing it, like the little video talked about, where they physically printed more money, or there's a lot of gimmicks involved in the different things they do now for how they do that. And the bottom line is the government just has, the government puts more money in the system. Not good. This is not a macroeconomics class, so we're not going to get that deep into how they go about putting money in the system. Just understand that the currency flow portion of inflation is just the government infusing money into the system so that the people have more money, which the currency flow inflation is an inject point that then causes the demand pull. Does that make sense? Just the fact that the government's putting money out there doesn't cause the inflation. It's the fact that because the government's putting the money out there, people have more money, so then we get the demand pull. Because there's more money chasing the same number of goods, the cost of those goods get more expensive, the value of our money goes down. Is it clear as Mississippi mud now? Here's a question that I have for you, okay? And again, I for all of you watching the video and everything, I look for your input because this is the first time I've taught this class. And as far as I know, it's the first time the class has been taught at Calvary, period. But my question to you is, did you get this same basic understanding of inflation and stuff as you were reading, you know, where did the penny candy go? Victoria, did you get these types of understandings?
I mostly got the last one, the currency inflow inflation. Like it talks about that part a lot, and then it also gives an example of the money in the barrel, showing that they had to carry all the money in a giant barrel because they had so much of it, but it was also just paying for the same measly things.
Right. Okay.
So like you have more money, but it didn't have as much value anymore.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to make sure that I was kind of tracking along, and what I was saying kind of was tracking along with what you understood from having read the book. So, and again, for all of you guys, be it with email, be it with comments that you give me when you post your assignments and stuff. If I'm saying something in the slides and in the lecture portion of the class that you're like, huh, that didn't match up with what I read in the book, then let me know. Because I might need to back up and explain something in a different way so that I am explaining it and staying consistent with the information that I'm giving you. Okay. So how do we define success? Okay, Victoria, I'm picking on you again. Financially, how do you define success?
Being able to buy the things you need, or be able to save up for more special things that you would want/need.
Oh, darling, did you
read my notes? You're not stressing on your ability to survive, pretty much.
Did you read my notes?
No.
I say that jokingly. One of the things I've always done, and I'm sure you guys, this isn't the first time you've heard it, okay? But as I was raising my children, and now I find myself doing the same thing with my grandchildren, is understanding the difference between needs and wants. Okay, so financial success is obviously having the financial means. For me anyway, this is how I would define it: having the financial means to be able to meet all of my needs, while at the same time being able to develop financial resources to be able to obtain those things that I want. Does that make sense? Okay, I need the means to meet my needs. I also want the ability to obtain my wants. So I have to meet my needs, but I want the ability to obtain. A little bit of different terminology, but I hope you're getting the nuance of where I'm trying to go there. Okay. You know what? I think what we're going to do again. I think we're going to call it. This is, I think, is a good stopping point for tonight. We're going to call it an end, and I will, as soon as I stop the recording, and close out of Teams, I will go on to Canvas and I will post the discussion question about, you know, do you guys want to do a paper based on the third book, or do you guys want to do a financial plan? The amount of work that's involved is going to be about the same, and I will give you, if you decide you want to do a financial plan, I will give you a format or a template that you can use to do a financial plan. And there are websites out there. I might even try to find a website or two that can assist on it as well. Again, I'm amenable to go in either direction with it. In all honesty, the more I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of leaning towards the financial plan because I think it would be, in a long term, be more beneficial to you all. And Victoria, like I said, if you've already written the paper on that one, I'm good with that. Even if we decide to go with a financial plan for everybody else, though I would suggest if we go with a financial plan that you think about at least doing the financial plan anyway, because it's something that I think will be very, very beneficial. Okay. So that said, we're going to call it a night for tonight, and we will be back next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And again, if you guys have signed up to take the class as an in the classroom student, then you need to be on live with us on Wednesday evening. If you signed up online as an online student, you do not have to be in a class on Wednesday evening, but if your schedule is such that you're available, I invite you to come join us, because I think that you'll have a better experience the more people we have on here, where we can have some robust discussion. Okay? Thank you guys, and you all have a good night. Let me stop this recording.